Welcome to the Carl Jackson Show. We have a bang-up show for you today. Guys, have you ever heard of the Great Replacement Theory? We're going to be talking about that some today, and that's what's happening at the southern border, as well as the Cloward-Piven strategy that the Biden administration and the left is utilizing to fundamentally transform America and to make us into a poor nation and a socialist nation. I'm going to go through all of the details of the Cloward-Piven strategy. There are 8 steps to collapse the United States of America. We'll talk about it. Also joining us for the majority of the show, Julio Rosas. He's an independent journalist. You can check him out, MostlyPeaceful.live. He's also the author of Mostly Peaceful. He has been on the border since the border crisis began on the ground. He's going to be reporting what he's seen and what he thinks we can do about it, and the dangers yet to come. All that coming up next. Welcome back to the Carl Jackson Show, and I'm joined now by my guest, Julio Rosas. You can find him online at MostlyPeaceful.live. Check out his Substack as well. I'll let him give you the information for that. Also, he is the author of Mostly Peaceful. But I brought Julio on because we have... honestly, guys, this isn't a crisis at the border. This is a strategy that's occurring at the border, as I talked about in my opening monologue. So I wanted to bring Julio Rosas on because he's been at the border. He's an independent journalist. He's spent a lot of time there. So Julio Rosas, welcome to the Carl Jackson Show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Julio, could you help us out here? You've been to the border multiple times. The border issue isn't getting any better. And as a matter of fact, it's getting worse. We've recorded some record high numbers just in the last couple of weeks here. We have a large illegal migrant caravan coming into the U.S.-Mexico border as we speak. These numbers are insane. What do you see on the ground that people like me that haven't been there might not understand? The smells, the amount of people coming at you. Could you give us maybe a description of what it's like to actually be on the ground?
I would just say it's overwhelming, and it's weird because when you look at illegal immigration historically, right, even under Democratic administrations, what comes to mind? Oh, it's people at night trying to avoid border patrol. Whenever you see movies or TV shows, you see the border patrol, the SUV pulling up, and the people are hiding in the brush, or they're hiding under a bridge, or whatever. They're doing everything that they can to avoid being detected by border patrol or American law enforcement. And since basically January 20th, 2021, it's been the complete opposite, where people in broad daylight, and even at the beginning of all this, people were still crossing either very early in the morning before sunrise or very late at night. Still trying to find border patrol, still trying to turn themselves in, at least the ones that want to be caught, because remember, there's still a large number of people who don't want to be caught. But now they're just doing it openly during the day. It's so even now it's still so weird to realize that here are people who don't necessarily have a legal right to enter our country, and they're just brazenly doing it in broad daylight with a bunch, with sometimes news media cameras around. So that's just kind of how upside down everything is, and in some cases it's gotten so bad. I particularly remember in Yuma of 2021 in December, where Border Patrol agents were the ones hiding from the illegal immigrants because they were unable to take in all these people because their holding facility was so over capacity. So they were ordered to literally not patrol the border because if they see people, they have to take them into custody. And so if they don't see them, quote unquote, they don't have to take them into custody. So it's just the way, as shocking and as overwhelming as it is, it's just weird.
Man, it's funny that you say that. Oftentimes I've interviewed Tom Homan. I've interviewed, I forget the gentleman that was in Trump's administration, Mark Morgan. I forget his name escapes. Yes, Mark Morgan. Thank you so much. Uh, but I've asked about the morale of the Border Patrol agents when they're doing their job. But you know what? I've never thought to ask, except when you just described it here, Julio. And again, I'm speaking to Julio Rosas. Make sure you check him out. MostlyPeaceful.live. MostlyPeaceful.live. He is the author of Mostly Peaceful, and he's an independent journalist, and he's been on the border lots, firsthand experience reporting directly from the southern border. But one thing that I've neglected and I've not thought about asking, I don't think, Julio, is what does it do for your psyche as a journalist? Being on the border, typically as a journalist, and you're a Marine. I mean, former Marine, but you're always a Marine, right? So you're on the border. You're a journalist. You're breaking news and you're sharing news, because typically I would think your hope would be, okay, I'm doing my job now, exposing what's happening at the border. Congress is going to do their job. I mean, that's what I would think if I was on the border. So what is it like being a journalist and you're like, I'm reporting this stuff. I'm doing all of this work. I'm collecting all of this data, all of this video, and I'm sharing it. And we have a United States government that doesn't seem to care about this at all.
I mean, I'll say that the border patrol agents do have it much harder because they live it every day. Thankfully, I don't have to see it all the time. But yeah, when you're on this big story that is, I mean, it's not even like a deep investigative dive. It's literally just go there and you see what's happening, you report on it. I mean, yeah, it's demoralizing. It's demoralizing because you know that it doesn't end at the border, right? It's the second and third and fourth effects further within the country, and it feels like at times you're just kind of the crazy guy with the end of the world sandwich board on the busy sidewalk, and no one's paying attention to you, right? And even though the threat and the problem is very real, and I would say that it was very similar on a different level, but it's similar to how I felt covering all the BLM riots in 2020, where again, he's like, hey, here's a very big issue. It's not ending anytime soon. And yet no one seems to want to actually do anything to prevent the violence that's spilling out into American streets. And so that's why I'm a little concerned about heading into next year with all the current protests that are happening. But yeah, it's the same thing with the border, where it's this giant problem. No, there are people who do care about it, but they're not the people in power who are actually able to do anything about it. And so, I've obviously come to definitely learn that, you shouldn't really hope for the U.S. government to do anything about it, because if you're waiting on the government to do something, you're going to be waiting for a very long time. And so I have to, just shut off, and I have to literally not think about it when I'm not there,
Wow.
because if I continue to do so, I'm going to lose my mind, because and now it's hard. It's hard when I'm, because like I said, the border crisis extends further into the country, and it's happening all over, in all these different cities and all the problems that it's causing. So, um, but it's not to the point where, I'm just forgetting about it and say, okay, I'm done with it, because like I said, it's a very important issue. It is something that I care deeply about, and it's not just about me, but it's all about the basically the forgotten Americans who live and work at the border. But because these aren't big cities, these aren't typically the people that politicians pay attention to. They're left to themselves, and so they appreciate the coverage. They appreciate the work that myself, Bill Mallusion, Ali Bradley, Jorge Ventura are doing to try to raise awareness about this, because even let's say a Republican takes back the White House in 2024, the effects of just these 4 years on just this one issue is going to be with us for decades.
And that's such a great point. We have just 2.5 minutes remaining in this block, Julio. But I sit here and I think, I'm like, whether it's a Trump more than likely or a DeSantis that gets in 2024, we've not experienced illegal immigration at this level. And let's say even Trump gets in, if he were to get in, he's a one-term president. Democrats obviously want this crisis. It's not a crisis, in my opinion. It's a strategy. I do you think that we can clean this up? I know Tom Homan said we're going to deport every single one. I just don't think it's going to be that easy because you have a bunch of Marxists that are literally infiltrated in the government. So part of your fight is going to be trying to get rid of them and then trying to implement strategies and policies that many of them don't want to implement.
Right, exactly. And it's not even just kind of the deep state, so to speak, that's going to be fighting against that, but it's also just the fact that, and this is something that not a lot of people are talking about, we're going to have a whole nother generation of DACA. There's so many
Yeah.
kids who are being brought over young, young kids that are being brought over with their families, and that are like take the ones from 2021. So they've already been here for 2 years, going on three, going to be four. So there, you can bet that all the immigration rights groups and NGOs, they're going to be filing lawsuits on their behalf, and then we're going to have a whole other fight when it comes to just on that particular subset. But then on top of that, you have, technically they're not illegal once they get processed into the United States. That's one of the issues because we said, well, just deport them if they're here legally. But the thing is that they're kind of not. They do have a quote unquote, ability to stay here to go through their asylum claims. And so you're just going to have a whole other legal battle that's going to go along with that. So that's what I'm saying, that it's going to be with us for a very long time because it's not just as simple as saying, well, just deport them. It depends on the country that they're from. It depends on how they got in. It depends on a lot of different things. So yeah, this is Trump or DeSantis or whoever is going to have a very difficult time to clean up this if Republican takes back the White House.
Man, it's such a great point. A new generation of DACA. Only 20 seconds left before we're out in this block here, Jorge. But yeah, this concerns me. This concerns me greatly. I mean, the demographic shift of the United States is going to be just absolutely insane come election time. Your take. 10 seconds left.
Yeah, no, it's this is one of the biggest issues, and as I've always said, that this was Biden's first crisis, and it is self-inflicted.
All right, welcome back to the Carl Jackson Show. I'm back with my guest, Julio Rosas. He is the author of Mostly Peaceful. Also, you can find him online, MostlyPeaceful.live. That is MostlyPeaceful.live. And he is an independent journalist. You've seen him on Fox News. You've seen him in other places. He's been covering the border crisis, if you will. And again, I'm saying that this isn't a crisis. This is a strategy. And Julio, I want to talk to you about that because you opened up my eyes in the first block that you were with us, and we're going to have a whole new generation of DACA, if you will, recipients. And so it's not going to be as easy as some people say to get rid of a lot of the illegal migrants that are coming into the country right now, just because a lot of these things will be tied up in court, in the court system, and perhaps for years. So let me ask you about this. I think this is a strategy. I think this is a strategy. In my opinion, this is the Cloward-Piven strategy, if you will, to overwhelm the system. You get a bunch of people on welfare. You get a bunch of people that are not assimilated into the country, don't love the country like you and I do, don't respect the laws like you and I do, and you get a perpetual or a permanent, basically, underclass, and this is what the Democrat Party wants, in my opinion. And so there is no motivation, no matter what any of us say, to close this border down. What do you say to that?
Absolutely. Like I was saying, the last block was that this is self-inflicted, and this is very much on purpose. The Biden administration knows all the problems that this is causing, and if they really wanted to stop it, they would take pretty concrete steps to do anything about it. And if you hear with what even Mayor Brandon Johnson or Eric Adams, they're not necessarily asking for the Biden administration to close the border. They're more asking just for more. They just want money. They just want more money so that they can better absorb kind of the impact that people are arriving. And so Yeah, so this is very deliberate. I think this is a way they try to get a new block of voters so that they can pass amnesty and say we gave you amnesty, so vote for us. I mean, and so this isn't some fringe conspiracy. This isn't just some racial thing. It's like no, this is blatantly obvious. Democrats themselves have admitted in the past to say like, yeah, we want this so that we can capture that voting block. And look, I'll give them credit. That is a smooth and tactic on their part, because they're saying that
I know.
that it's not happening when they are very obviously trying to do it. So um, beyond that, I don't know why that they want this to happen. There's really no other explanation for it, because they say that they're for immigrants. They say that they're again they're for protecting these people. When one of the biggest reasons why I'm against illegal immigration is because the people who suffer the most initially are the illegal immigrants themselves, when they have to hand themselves over to the cartels and human smuggling and all the atrocities that happen on the way north. And it's like, why would you allow that to happen? The human trafficking, the sex trafficking, the child sex trafficking that has exploded as a result of all this. I mean, it's horrific. Why would anyone want this? And Democrats, they want voters, and so that to them that is a price that they're willing to have other people pay so they can have power.
What's it's amazing that you say that, Julio, because I think the Republican Party, I don't understand why we say this every election cycle, and then it's always true for the next election cycle. But their messaging stinks. I understand, except for the power of the purse, which I think they should be utilizing, a whole lot better than they are. I don't understand why they don't get in front of this issue and start stringing at the hearts of Americans as well, making this an emotional issue. I've had on another independent journalist, a young lady by the name of Arden Young, and she's been exposing what's happening at Pornhub and saying how they're making money off of people that are being trafficked literally on their website, and they're like, yeah, we know what's happening, blah blah blah, and I'm just sitting here, man. We don't know what older women and young children are going through. Not, I mean, let alone what they have to experience just crossing through the rough terrain with these Mexican cartels. Why is it that the Republican Party, in your opinion, just can't seem to get a cohesive message beyond just the borders are invaded? Yes, that speaks to the base, but obviously a lot of people must not be listening.
I, I think it's just what happens with DC politics. I mean, I unfortunately lived in that area for 6 years, and that was 4 years too many. And it's a bubble. I mean, it's a bubble, and sure, I mean, there's certain levels to it. Obviously, the media and Democrats are on a different level, but because to me, one of the biggest indicators of just how bad things are is that the Republican caucus can't even in the House can't even get enough votes to impeach Secretary Mayorkas, and that's something that the base wants 100%, nearly 100%. Yeah, sure, it might not get anywhere in the Senate because okay, fine, whatever. But at least follow through on that. You said you were going to do that, so okay, follow through on that. And then okay, fine, we had some things with the speaker fight and all this other stuff. It's like okay, so we got new leadership, technically, and so like just do something about it. That's what Republican voters want. So why can't you? And of course, that's just one issue that House Republicans just can't seem to really have any sort of follow through on. And so I think it's just the fact that there's apathy. There's just that like, oh, we know better than our voters, and it's just typical. It's just typical, politician thinking. And obviously there's exceptions to that, but it's just that when you have this sort of mindset that just politicians in general just seem to have about like we don't care, we don't really, it doesn't really matter. Well, then yeah, then you're going to have this, and so that's why. And I know it's cliche to say, I know it's a meme, but I just can't stress enough of just how important this next election is, and how if let's say Biden or whatever Democrat remains in the White House, I just cannot see this country being even remotely the same when it comes to the border being as open it is now for another 4 years. And again, that's just one issue. Doesn't even talk about the economy. Doesn't even talk about foreign policy. So this is a very important election, and it's definitely a make or break.
And it's important that you say that. And I look at the 2024 election, and we obviously there's a presidential primary I figure it'll either continue after Iowa or it'll pretty much end after Iowa. Whether depending on whether or not these polls are accurate. I don't necessarily believe them, but I do believe that Trump is way ahead. So we'll see how that shakes out. But I'm thinking of 2024. I'm like, the White House isn't enough. You're going to have some strong leadership in Congress and the House of Representatives. You're going to have to take back the Senate as Republicans, and they've been lackluster with the exception of a handful of conservative mainstays in the Senate that are always the names that are on the news or fighting the battle seemingly. This is absolutely. This just scares the crud out of me, to be honest with you, Julio. Talk about, listen, the way that you said it best, how the elections or actually how the country won't be the same. I think about schools. I think about how they're going to be flooded. People are going to get, not as great of an education because the classrooms are going to be flooded. Not to mention, you're going to have to hire a bunch of people that are bilingual. Crime, the medical care. Just talk about some of the basic stuff that I think a lot of Americans probably don't think about when it comes to illegal immigration and how it's going to impact them as American citizens and taxpayers.
Yeah, I mean, just on the healthcare issue alone, I mean, Eagle Pass, Maverick County is not exactly a wealthy county in Texas, and their main hospital has had to foot the bill. Last time I checked, it was close to $1 million, and that's a lot for a county like that. But again, these people aren't staying in Eagle Pass or Maverick County; they're going further in. When it comes to when it comes to their needs, a lot of these people they are coming from third world countries that don't have the same healthcare. As much as like we like to slag on our healthcare system, it is much better than large parts of the world. And so these people are coming over with very serious problems that require long-term care. And if they since hospitals cannot refuse people, for walk-ins, they require, they're requiring like heart transplants. They're requiring, just the amount of pregnancies and the complications and all that and all the costs that are associated with that. I mean, it's crazy what hospitals are having to do to foot the bill for people that probably aren't going to pay them back, or at least pay them back in full, if they're lucky. So just on that, and then yes, you're right. I mean, New York City, it's completely inundated with all these children that are coming in now. And again, you're talking about bilingual. It's not even people who are coming from Latin American countries anymore. It's people coming from all over the world. So
That's
I
true.
just
That's so true.
it's just so crazy with how. Again, the second, third, fourth effects. Like, sure, if you don't live on the border, it doesn't matter. The border's coming to you.
Man, that is such a great point, and you're right. I said bilingual. Julio, if you would, I'd like for you to stay with us for another block, if you don't mind, because Texas is doing something that I want to talk about with you. Texas has arrested thousands at the U.S.-Mexico border, and the state has expanded its power. But I'm like, could we not have done this sooner? I mean, maybe there's something that I'm missing, because you're right. This border crisis, or this open border strategy, is coming to a city near you. I'm speaking with Julio Rosas. Go and check him out, MostlyPeaceful.live. He is the author of Mostly Peaceful, so please check him out online. We'll be back with him in just a few. All right, welcome back to the Carl Jackson Show. Again, I'm back with my guest, Julio Rosas. You can check him out online, MostlyPeaceful.live, which actually, that name has a really funny background. I'm going to let him tell you the story about that. And author of Mostly Peaceful. And again, he's an independent journalist. You've seen him reporting on the border. I mean, he's been there. He's seen everything that is happening. One of the top independent journalists, in my opinion, covering the U.S. southern border and the open border strategy being implemented by the Democrat Party. Julio, before we go on, just real quickly, MostlyPeaceful.live. Tell people where they can go to find you. And also the author of the book, Mostly Peaceful. Just remind people where that title came from, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so Mostly Peaceful is my MostlyPeaceful.live is my Substack, and then my book Fiery but Mostly Peaceful. It all stems back to the 2020 BLM riots. I was in Kenosha covering the riots that were happening there. I woke up the next morning and I saw people were posting that CNN chyron that said "Fiery but Mostly Peaceful protest in Kenosha, Wisconsin," and I'm thinking, at first I thought, wow, that's a really good Photoshop. because it was just a screenshot. But then someone posted the video. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. And so it was. CNN is definitely not a fan of any of their work, but that obviously I've kind of co-opted that gaffe in because it was quintessential, basically the very distillation of just how horrible the media was covering all those riots back then.
And it's so funny because every once in a while I'll run across those clips on my feed to this day, and I can't help but to crack up and laugh. But I should probably be crying, Julio, because you touched on this earlier in the show. But what we experienced in 2020, I mean, again, the federal government did absolutely nothing about the and listen, I love Trump, but I didn't. I'll be frank, I didn't get that. I'm afraid that that type of violence could erupt again. Here's what I'm concerned about. I don't think people would take it as lightly as they did in 2020. So I'm very concerned that things could get completely out of hand. And then we have Biden or whomever is running the White House and the administration, whom basically Antifa, BLM, and all of these kind of people are essentially, in my opinion, basically the brown shirts for the Democrat Party.
Yeah, and what's been happening at our border is very just similar to just the overall just slow decline and degrading of what our country, used to be, right? And when you look at the lack of policing in the inner cities, it's basically the same thing as the lack of policing in at our border, right? And it's very similar. I mean, the term anarcho tyranny is what comes to mind. So what I see happening on our border is very similar to what's happening in our cities when it comes to the security of our elections, and there's just no confidence in anything. There's nothing that is seemingly there. The guardrails and the safeguards that you'd think would be in place are no longer there, and it's just kind of a free for all. And it's just those in power are going to protect themselves, and the rest of the people can go can do whatever. So that's why when people, especially at the very beginning, when people are like, "Oh, it's just the border," it's just Republicans fear mongering. It's like, no, this is a very serious issue because when you have, I mean, it's the same exact thing with the Border Patrol being demoralized and understaffed. It's the same exact thing with any of the major cities that are dealing with. Obviously, kind of a different cause, different effects, but it's all one and the same. And again, it's all very deliberate. It's all very. When I was going through boot camp, my drill instructors would tell us, as chaotic and as jarring and as stressful as the training regimen was, there was a method to the madness. And what we're seeing now, especially with the pro-Hamas rallies and protests here in the States, there is a method to the madness with that. And same thing with our border, same thing with a lot of other things with foreign policy and all that. And it's obviously nothing good, but it's just that's just the way I see it. When you're on the ground and you get to see all these stuff firsthand, you can kind of see through the fog, and you kind of see through the kind of the obfuscation, and you see like, no, yeah, there are some driving forces behind this that want the chaos, that want all this kind of disorder.
That's a great point. Are you able to, when you were on the ground in these areas, are you able to kind of sniff out, if you will, or spot out what appears to be, maybe some of the phonies, maybe some of the organizers? I shouldn't say phonies, that's the wrong word, but perhaps the organizers where you're like, okay, this is clearly strategic, this is clearly a plan, this is clearly people are being paid, so on, etc. Was there clear, a clear discernment, if you will, on the ground where you could see that?
Well, I mean, I'll give you an example. So, in DC, there's a lot of protests, right? I mean, some large, some very small, and especially in 2020, when the riots largely died down for that particular area, there were still protests going on. And I would see a lot of the same people at all these things. And of course, I'm thinking, well, how do you have a job? Like, what do you do outside of this? Because, my job, the reason why I'm noticing this, because it is my job to be out here. I'm paid to be out here. So how are you able to, especially in an expensive city like Washington, D.C., how are you able to protest full time nearly. And there's one woman in particular I've been seeing since 2019, since like the first impeachment of Trump.
Wow.
And she came down to Miami when I was covering when Trump came down to the federal courthouse for the first time for that case. I saw her in Miami. I'm thinking, like, travel is expensive these days with inflation and all that. How are you able to come down here just for this and then go? I mean, so yeah, you just kind of notice these things, and then and again, that's just one subgroup, and then it doesn't even touch on all the again, the Palestinian protests and those organizers. There's this one group called Within Our Lifetime that organizes basically all the New York City ones, and they are out every single day. I'm not even. They just posted on their Instagram an emergency protest for later today. So I'm just thinking, how are you able to support yourselves, especially in an expensive city like New York City? So yeah, that's why it's just not some fringe conspiracy. That, like, no, there are some driving forces behind this that just obviously want the chaos, but also because they do support with what they're doing. Obviously, it's not just they're, but who knows? They could be useful idiots or whatever. But obviously there's stuff that's organic, stuff that's spontaneous, but that's why I'm concerned with heading into this year when it comes to political violence, because 2020 really showed them how far they were able to take it and how much they were able to get away with, and there hasn't been accountability. If you're January 6th, okay, accountability is coming towards you. The hammer's going to fall down on you. But if you I don't know, let's say you set a store on fire and kill a guy, because you were doing a BLM protest, the DOJ is going to be like, well, yeah, actually, we'll reduce his sentence because his heart was in the right place. And that case actually happened, by the way. I'm not making that up. That actually happened. The guy set a store on fire, killed somebody, and they said, well, the DOJ said, well, we'll give him a little less time just because he was protesting for a good cause, which is absolutely insane. So yeah, the far left is organized. The far left is energized. They're going to use the border. They're going to use all these different issues to really drive a wedge and cause, at the very minimum, just cause disorder, to kind of further their agenda. When people say, oh, well, why are they blocking traffic, or why are they protesting at these Christmas events? They're not going to convince anybody. They're not trying to convince anybody. They're just flexing their muscle. They're just showing off of how much they're able to get away with, because they know that those in power are not going to do anything about it. And so it's kind of, to them, it's like, well, what are you going to do about it?
Wow, man, that is a great point. Such a great insight. We only have a couple minutes left, and it just quickly reminds me too. Oh, fascist Fauci, Dr. Anthony Fauci, the whole thing with the COVID lockdowns. I mean. Anyway, listen, I'll go off on a tangent on that. We only have a couple minutes left. Let me get to this Texas issue. I said I wanted to talk to you about that. Texas has arrested thousands at the U.S.-Mexico border as state expands powers to arrest migrants. This is a Fox News headline. Texas authorities have arrested nearly 10,000 migrants who illegally crossed the U.S.-Mexico border under a new arrest and jail operation aimed at deterring illegal immigration. Julio, why couldn't they have done this sooner? This doesn't make any sense to me. Oh, and just real quickly, the point I was making with Fauci was, he was like, hey, it's okay to protest, BLM or, social justice, even when COVID is out. So 2024 isn't a lockdown at all for Republicans. But respond to this Texas issue here.
So I understand the kind of criticisms, being against Abbott and his handling of the border. What I have to remind people is that the problem is you're trying to have a state address a federal issue. Immigration falls under federal jurisdiction. That's their role. That's their job. Obviously, it's a problem when the federal government doesn't want to actually do anything about it. And so what we've seen is that Texas is trying to do the best that they can, but it's. They can only do so much, because if they do something that the federal government doesn't like, which is often, the federal government just has more power than the state does, and they're going to say, nope, you can't do that. So I think it just ultimately just comes down to legal issues.
Oh, my goodness. Anyway, Julio Rosas is his name, MostlyPeaceful.live. Check him out. Also the author of Mostly Peaceful. Julio Rosas, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Welcome to the Carl Jackson Show. I appreciate you guys joining us today. You can find me online at the Carl Jackson Show, wherever you go to subscribe to your podcast. The Carl Jackson Show. Also find me on social media at the Carl Jackson Show. We're on X, we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, True Social, and Getter. And today's show is brought to you in part by MyPillow.com. Right now, there is a great deal available for my listeners. You go to MyPillow.com, click on the radio podcast square. There are Giza Dream Sheets that are available to you for $29.98. 10-year warranty, 60-day money-back guarantee, and there are deals that are up to half off, in some cases even more. If you go to mypillow.com, click on the radio podcast square, and enter my name, Carl, or give them a call, 1-800-858-0263, 1-800-858-0263, and mention my name, Carl. Tell them that I sent you. Okay, guys, we don't have a crisis at the border. We have a strategy that is being implemented at the southern border. What we have being implemented is what's called the Great Replacement Theory, and it's also the Cloward-Piven strategy. And I'm going to go. I'm going to talk about this in this block. We have a guest that's joining us for the remainder of the show, and that is Julio Rosas. So stay tuned for him. Many of you might know him as the independent journalist, or one of the better independent journalists, in my opinion, that have been covering the strategy, otherwise known as the crisis, the Biden border crisis that's ongoing at the southern border, and that is not going to stop. So I look forward to speaking to Julio Rosas, the author of Mostly Peaceful, and an independent journalist that has been covering the border crisis from day one of the Biden administration on the ground. So we'll check in with him. But have you heard of the Cloward-Piven strategy? It is a strategy that was developed by a bunch of or a couple of eggheads to basically destroy the United States of America. Let me give you, it's an 8-step plan. Let me give you a brief synopsis of the history of the Cloward-Piven strategy and how it is being implemented. And the Great Replacement Theory is simply this. Listen, the left wants to replace white males. It is that simple. They want to replace the white males. They see them as the colonizers. The left sees them as the people, especially white male, evangelical males, as the people that are getting in the way of the fascists, of the Marxists taking over the United States of America. So what do? They want to bring in an influx of illegal aliens into the country that are not assimilated into this country. They want a permanent underclass that will rely on welfare, that will rely on the Democrat Party. Meanwhile, they'll also tell women, like they are doing from the Democrat Party, and even some women on the right, if you will, hey, pro-choice, kill your baby. And while you're killing your baby, you have illegal migrants that are coming into the United States of America and having their babies, therefore replacing you, therefore replacing people that fundamentally believed in our Judeo-Christian value system, that fundamentally believed in the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the Declaration of Independence. There's an 8-step plan, again, that was designed in 1966 by a hardcore anti-American leftist by the name and socialist by the name of Richard Cloward, and also Francis Fox Piven, that called for overloading the U.S. public welfare system in order to basically advance a crisis that would lead to the replacement of the welfare system for an entire socialist system, a nationalized system. So here's the plan. All right, so the plan is basically, number 1, healthcare now. Number 2, poverty. Number 3, debt. Number 4, gun control. Number 6, welfare, more welfare. That's number 5. Number 6, education. Number 7, religion. Number 8, class warfare, which I think has now been replaced with the identity politics or race warfare, if you will. All right, so now let's go over the first one, healthcare now. Control healthcare. And you control the people. Guys, we see this with Obamacare. Isn't it amazing that you have a healthcare system? Obama promised us that the Obamacare would be cheaper. It would be less expensive for a family of 4, when in fact it's skyrocketed just a year or so later. And some of you didn't see those rates rise as high for probably a couple of years to a few years. But now we're left with a healthcare system that is still, frankly, the best in the world, but way worse than it was was prior to Obama. And what was the goal? The goal was not to give you better health care. What he did was embolden insurance companies, paid insurance companies off. They got richer. Your health care got worse because doctors have to do more paperwork. You have fewer people going to school to become doctors, fewer people going to school to become nurses, and the ones that are there are getting burned out because they're having to treat so many patients. They can't spend the time with you that they used to, but this is all a part of collapsing the system. Not to mention, you're only allowed to purchase insurance when the government tells you you can purchase insurance regardless of when you're feeling sick. But if you can control healthcare, think of what else you can control. Well, there's man-made climate change. You know what? We think fossil fuels that are natural are really dangerous. So what we're going to do is create this man-made EV that is doing much damage to places where these batteries are mined for, or the particles that go into these batteries are mined for. But all right, we'll control them in that way. Climate change is dangerous. What you eat is dangerous. Oh, you better take a vaccine that we tell you to take. Otherwise, you're going to be a threat to the rest of society. So if you can control people's health care, you can control virtually every aspect of their lives. Hence Obamacare. Health care should be between the patient and the doctor. Number 2, poverty. Increase. This is the Cloward-Piven strategy. Increase the poverty level as high as possible. Poor people are easier to control. All right, and will not fight back if you are providing everything for them to live. All right, so we sit here as conservatives, as constitutionalists, as Republicans, and we're like, man, I say it all the time. Democrats are only successful when you're unsuccessful. How can you vote for the Democrat Party? But the truth is they keep you in bondage. That's the goal. Keep more poor people that are gonna depend on the government, and so they'll listen to everything the government says. And not only that, they will continue to vote for leaders that will keep them in bondage because they don't know what it's like to experience that freedom, economic freedom anymore. This is the goal of the left. This is Cloward-Piven's number 3. Increase the debt to an unsustainable level. Hello? Is that happening in the United States right now? We're constantly spending. That way you are able to increase taxes, and this will produce more poverty. You guys notice the middle class is hurting greatly under Bidenflation right now. I mean, our dollar is being stretched like no one's business. It doesn't go near as far as it used to just a couple or 3 years ago. This is absolutely insane. But the goal is to make the middle class part of the poor class, and the Biden administration is exceeding at doing just that. Gun control. Remove the ability to defend themselves from the government. That way you are able to create a police state. Guys, the Second Amendment isn't for chasing down bunny rabbits or anything like that. The Second Amendment is for you to be able to defend yourself against a fascist dictator, against a tyrannical government. No one likes to think about that. It is a scary thought. Mind you, I pray to God there's never another civil war inside of the United States of America. I pray to God that some dictator like this wannabe that's trying to rise up right now in Joe Biden would take control of the national elections completely, where we don't have a say, and force us to live the type of lives that they want us to live. But the goal of them taking away your guns, listen, guys, in red states where there are more guns, believe it or not, there's less crime. Cities, counties, more guns, less crime. That's a statistical fact, all right? Now, welfare. Take control of every aspect of their lives. That includes food, housing, and income. I know people that are on welfare that don't work, sadly. Some of them are a little mental, but they're hooked on government welfare, and they're not going anywhere. And whatever the Democrat Party says about a Republican candidate, whether it's Trump, whether it's DeSantis, whether it's anyone else, they hate them. They absolutely hate them. Why? Because they see those people as a threat to taking away their livelihood. So anything the Democrat Party says about them, they are going to believe. Number 6, education. Take control of what people read and listen to. That way you take control of what children learn in school. All right. And we see this happening in our schools. Look at all the trans craze and everything else that's happening in our school, DEI and CRT. All of this stuff, they're using the educational system not to educate people, but honestly, when you think about it, to weed out people. right? If you're not going to go along to get along, if you're not going to follow our plan to make this country a socialist country, well, bye-bye, see you later. We see that happening at Harvard. Number 7, religion. Remove the belief in God from the government and the schools. If you remove the belief in God from the government and schools, then there's a hole, right? There's a vacuum. All right. And what's going to fill it? Government. You replace God with government. And that is exactly what the left is doing. You hear all these people that don't want to be bothered with Christianity, don't want to be bothered with Judaism. All right. All these anti-Semitic protests popping up. They don't want God. We're replacing God with government. Class warfare. Now it's identity politics. They are dividing the people so that they can conquer all of us using race, ethnicity, and so on. This is the Cloward-Piven strategy that is being employed by Democrats. We'll be back with Julio Rosas.